Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why sometimes you just can't stop your eyes from being drawn to something that stands out, even if it is not what you are looking for? This new study dives into that very question, exploring how our everyday environments might be teaching us to search in specific ways, and why some ways are easier to learn than others. Imagine you are at a grocery store looking for a specific brand of cereal. Sometimes your eyes might just wander to the brightest, most colorful box. That is your brain's automatic bottom-up system at work, drawn to things that grab your attention. But you also might know that your brand is usually on a middle shelf, so you might focus your search more deliberately. That is your top-down system, using your knowledge and goals to guide your eyes. The big question this research tackles is how we decide or even learn. Which of these strategies to use? Does the world around us subtly train us? And if so, is it easy to learn both strategies? Or are some harder to pick up? The researchers wanted to see if they could train people to use different search strategies just by changing the statistical patterns of the environment. They designed a visual search task where participants had to find a target item. The items on the screen were divided into two groups, each with a different color. Crucially, these groups were always unequal in size. Think of it like having a small cluster of blue items and a much larger cluster of red items. Now, here's the key. Smaller groups tend to be more visually striking or salient. So naturally, your attention might be drawn to the smaller group first. This is the bottom-up strategy, but what if the target item was actually more likely to be in the larger, less obviously attention-grabbing group? To find it efficiently, you'd need to use a top-down strategy, actively directing your attention to where you expect the target to be, even if it is not the most visually striking thing. They set up 3 different training conditions for their participants. In one condition, called minority training, the target item was more often found in the smaller, more salient group. The idea here is to encourage and strengthen the bottom-up, salience-based search. In another condition, majority training, the target was more often found in the larger, less salient group. This condition was designed to encourage the top-down controlled search strategy. Finally, there was a neutral condition where the target's location was unrelated to the group size, meaning neither strategy was particularly favored. So, what happened? In experiment 1, when participants were trained in the minority condition, they got even better at searching the smaller salient groups. Their search times improved when the target appeared in these groups, showing they were learning to lean into that natural bottom-up strategy. But here is where the differences start to show when it came to the majority training condition, where they were supposed to learn to prioritize the larger group. It didn't work as well. The participants still showed a preference for the smaller salient groups. It seemed like even when the statistics of the environment suggested they should look at the bigger group, they still defaulted to looking at the smaller, more attention-grabbing one. The researchers thought maybe there is something else making the search easy in experiment 1. In the first experiment, the target items had slightly different shapes from the distractors. This extra pop-out feature might have made it too easy to find the target regardless of the color group. So, for experiment 2, they changed the shapes. Now, all the items were the same basic shaped triangles. The only real difference was their color and orientation. This made the search harder and minimized those cheating shape cues. And it worked. In experiment 2, when participants were trained in the majority condition, they actually did adapt. They learned to de-emphasize the smaller salient color group and look more towards the larger group when the statistics favored it. This was a significant finding. It showed that people can learn to override that natural pull towards salience. But it seems to be easier when there aren't other easy ways to find the target like distinct shapes. But how exactly did they learn to do this? Did they just ignore the smaller group entirely from the start? Or were they still briefly drawn to it and then had to consciously shift their attention away? To answer this, they ran experiment 3 using a clever attentional probe technique. Imagine looking at the screen and then suddenly, for a tiny fraction of a second, the search display is replaced by a grid of letters. Where those letters appear on the screen gives a clue about where your attention was just before the switch. In experiment 3, they measured where participants' attention was actually going. The results were fascinating. In the majority training condition, where the target was more likely to be in the larger group, the probe letters appeared more often in areas with majority-colored items. This strongly suggests that participants were indeed directing their attention towards the larger group, effectively overriding the natural salience of the smaller group. This is different from just randomly searching. They were actively choosing where to look. So, what is the big takeaway from all this? The study shows that our environment constantly teaches us how to search. We learn to pay attention to statistical regularities, like which color group is more likely to contain the target. But to raise a clear asymmetry, we are much quicker to learn and adopt strategies that align with our natural tendency to be drawn to visually salient things, like smaller groups. Learning to prioritize the larger, less salient group requires more effort. And frankly, we seem to be less willing to do that unless there are fewer distractions and the statistics strongly push us in that direction. Think of it like this. Our brains are a bit lazy. They prefer the easy route. Following salience is like cruising downhill. It happens automatically. Reaching for the less salient target is like pushing a boulder uphill. It takes conscious effort. We'll only do it if the reward at the top is really worth the climb. In this study, the reward was finding the target faster, and that reward needed to be significant enough to overcome the effort cost of ignoring the flashing, attention-grabbing smaller group. This research has some really interesting implications. It suggests that if we want to train people to be better at controlled, goal-directed search, we might need to design environments where the easy salient options are less likely to lead to the target. For example, in educational settings or training programs, if a more complex skill requires focused attention, making sure there aren't too many shiny objects competing for attention could be crucial. Of course, like all studies, this one has its limits. The participants were mostly young adults from a university. Their experiences and cognitive abilities might be different from the general population. Plus, the tasks were very controlled and simple. In the real world, things are much messier, with more distractions and fewer clear rules. So, while this study gives us a valuable glimpse into how our search strategies are shaped, it doesn't tell us everything about how we search in our everyday lives. Overall, this research paints a fascinating picture of how we learn to navigate the visual world. It is not just about what is in front of us, but also about the subtle statistical patterns that guide our attention, and the trade-off between effortless attention capture and the cost of focus control. So, what do you think about this? Does this explain why you sometimes get distracted by the most obvious thing on the screen, even when you know what you're supposed to be looking for? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this interesting, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more insights into the human mind, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.